Yeah. So of course, I'm extremely interested in brain health. I almost went into to get a PhD in neuroscience, and then I went into medicine. I specialized in psychiatry, and then in addiction medicine. So now I'm doing regenerative medicine. And so I really want to help regenerate the brain. But the brain is one of the most challenging organs to help. And so especially for these degenerative neural conditions, like Alzheimer's, like ALS, like Parkinson's, MS, or even in pediatric populations, autism, ADHD. So these are really, really challenging. So you mentioned good results in Alzheimer's. What about in the other categories that I kind of talked
Oh,
about?
we have a great doctor out in California. Her name is Joquita Handy, and we did a study with her with autism.
Mm.
And what we found was the autistic population doesn't have alpha. So we developed a series for them that's called the Children's Opportunity for Brilliance. That's the program. And what we do
This
is I
is
tell story.
is it under children's opportunity? Is that what
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
okay.
It's called, I think it's called Children's Health now or something like that. But
Okay.
there's 43 sessions now. And
Wonderful.
when we did the research with her, we only had 10. And there's stories that I tell, that the kids listen to, but they're getting the brainwave entrainment. The incredible part of that one that really, I mean, nobody could, when we had the meeting with the parents after when we're releasing the study, 90% of them were speaking at the end of this 6-week study because they had, as soon as they were up to 23% alpha activity, they started speaking. And that's what you need to communicate. Like when somebody has a fear of public speaking out there in the world, it's because they heighten their beta because the fear and their alpha collapses, and then they can't speak because that's the brainwave they need. The fear takes over and runs the system. So once these kids who had that, they could already think it, but now they could communicate it. And what we found was that once they started so there's only 100% energy in the brain, right? So we want to see about 45% beta and about 30% alpha and about 10% theta, and it kind of goes like a mountain like that. And these kids were about 70 to 80% delta, and they would have high theta, in regards to that, about 15% of that, and then they have 50% beta. There'd be no alpha. So the brain waves work more like an analog clock. They don't work like digital. You can't just go from beta to theta. You got to go through alpha. So what would happen to the kids is they would, when they're stimming, if you've ever seen a kid that starts stimming, they're in high beta. But then when they go to disassociate, they go, oh, that's just Jimmy. He's in a mood. Well, he's in high theta. They don't have any way to mitigate those two emotions. Also, alpha, we found that they were no longer hitting the walls, hitting people, being destructive, because they could tell the difference between themselves and the world. Without alpha, you can't discern that. You don't have that creative faculty to say, this monitor is not me. And so when they're being abusive to other people, they're not doing that on purpose. They're doing that because they're trying to test their limits of their boundaries.
It's fascinating. How long does the result last? For a kid, autism is a very chronic long-term condition.
We did a 6-month washout. They still had their 23% alpha, but the equipment's so inexpensive that the parents own it. And you have to do something. It doesn't have to be BrainTap, but you have to do something. So I always tell people you need to get very interested in Tai Chi, yoga, or dance. I mean, even if you can't afford a dance class, just turn on the radio, shut your blinds, and dance as if nobody's watching. Because you have to move and breathe to get the nervous system going. So you either have to do it in the way they would do it in ancient traditions. Think about it. If you were in an ancient tribe and you'd come to the fire at night and they'd have their ceremonies, you'd be up dancing and that's all about getting nervous system active, because they're stressed to death. I mean, they're out there life and death every day. We just have to make it to the grocery store and pick up the food. They had to go get it,
Yeah.
and so there was a lot of stress back then. So they always, if you look at the way the ancient cultures would de-stress, we need more of that, or the brain's just going to dysregulate again. And this is something for those out there that know about gut health. If you have leaky gut, you have a leaky brain, because we have a brain biome and a gut biome, and our heart actually regulates both of them. So if we can tune into our hearts and basically relax, then the nervous system knows how to self-regulate. But if we stay in a state of hypertension and stress and anger and fear is probably the biggest deterrent to health in our bodies, because fear just puts a dead hold stop to every function, because our body thinks there's a tiger or whatever's going to attack us. And so the body says, we need to flee, and that's a whole different set of neuroactivity than it would be to sit by the ocean and have a cold one with a friend or something. There's a big difference there.